So if you could click the link in the top of the description box below to watch my video from earlier today to support my failing dead YouTube channel, me and Andrew Luck would appreciate it. So it's safe to say the 2019 Miami Dolphins are not a good football team. Through 3 games of this NFL season, they're averaging a whopping 5.3 points per game, which is dead last in the league, only 222 total yards per game, which is 31st in the league, 177.3 passing yards per game, which is good for second to last, which would probably be dead last if they weren't trying to come from behind every single game, so they have to pass almost every play, and almost dead last in rushing yards per game as well, with 45 yards per game. They're 0-3 and more than likely gonna easily go 0-16 throughout this regular season and more than likely secure the #1 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. And the question for you guys today, who do you think the Dolphins are gonna pick with their #1 overall selection? Are they going to pick Tua, or are they going to go elsewhere with their #1 pick? Because more than likely, they're going to have the #1 pick. I mean, if somebody ends up allowing the Dolphins to beat them, that will be an absolute catastrophe, and that coaching staff needs to be fired immediately. Because the Dolphins are legitimately one of the worst teams I've seen in my lifetime. I really don't see any NFL team that the Dolphins have on their schedule that they could compete with. With some players like Minkah Fitzpatrick and company getting traded away from the team continues to get worse and worse. But what does that mean for them in Madden 20? Now, if you go and jump into a franchise and see how bad the Dolphins are real time, if you go and do the real life roster, which you can do in franchise mode on Madden, you hop into this week of the regular season and pick the Miami Dolphins from there. The most up-to-date rosters have the Miami Dolphins at a whopping 63 overall, 61 offense, and a 69 defense. That's one of the worst overall teams I have ever seen, and me personally, that I've ever seen in any Madden game that I've ever played in my entire life. And I mean, if you go in this team, which is a funny glitch, which I've noticed throughout doing a few videos, if you go into week 4 of the real life rosters and connected franchise, for some reason it automatically says start playing regular season week number 7, although when you do start the franchise, it brings you into week 4. But I mean, if you look at this team, once again, 63 overall, 61 offense, 69 defense. I mean, that 61 overall offense, dude, that's got to be the worst there's ever been for any NFL team ever. But we'll see that in today's video, as we are going to see if the Miami Dolphins are in fact the lowest rated team in the history of the Madden franchise. Now you look at their team, dude, the offensive line absolutely catastrophic. They had a solid franchise left tackle, Laremy Tunsil, who they traded away before the season even began. Tight end Gesicki is one of the best players on this offense. Josh Rosen, like, poor guy, he has nobody around him and is pretty much here to fail. Like, poor guy. Like, how is he set up to do anything but fail? Running back, a solid, talented running back in Kenyon Drake and Ballage. Wide receiver core, I mean, they're the best, obviously, overall players in the offense. I'm not sure if you guys have seen, they've dropped so many passes from Josh Rosen the first few weeks of this season. I mean, it's sad for Mr. Josh Rosen, but Devontae Parker, highest overall player, tied with Kenyon Drake in this offense, with Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant at a 74. Allen Hurns at a 73, the former Jaguar. But moving on to their defense, the highest rated player on the entire team is Rashad Jones. And yeah, he's 83, but he's plus 30 years old, so he's going to probably begin to get worse and worse as he continues to age. The linebacker core, I mean, it's relatively young, but it's just not good. Same thing with the defensive line, just not good at all. Xavier Howard, solid as well, at an 82 overall, one of the 2 players on this team that are over 80 overall, which is absolutely embarrassing, as a lot of teams in the NFL have 80 overall players in terms of Madden all across the board on their starting lineups. McCain is free safety. It's just an absolute catastrophic team, as even their punter and kicker is not that high of an overall. But guys, it is now time to see. Through much digging on the internet, I have found out if the Miami Dolphins are in fact the lowest rated team in the history of Madden. A franchise that has been going on nearly 30 years. 30 years of NFL action put into a football simulation game. Are the Miami Dolphins the worst of them all? Let's find out. Now, this initially was supposed to be the top 10 worst teams in the history of Madden, but some of the rosters from the older Maddens are not available when I did as much digging as I possibly could and found as much information as I possibly could to compile this list. It's actually only going to be a top 8 because of number 9 and 10 teams, which was going to be the 2000 Cleveland Browns in Madden 2001 and the 2001 Cleveland Browns in Madden 2002 at a 68 overall team and then a 66 overall team respectively. But all these websites have conflicting overall, so we're just going to completely remove them from this list and start at number 8. And also forgot to mention, in a lot of the older Maddens, specifically in the 90s, they experimented with some weird type of overall schemes, so they're not really based on numbers, so the overalls aren't actually numerical, so you can't necessarily compare that rating to ratings that are displayed by a number. So for those teams, for those Maddens, we just completely took them out of this list, which comes at the hands of the New York Giants from 1996 in Madden 97, coming in at a 68.5 overall. Yes, back almost 20 years ago now, Madden overalls used to take and count a decimal point, which I think that would actually be pretty useful today in terms of the Madden overalls, because a lot of the overalls today make no sense. Like, for example here, the Miami Dolphins overall. It's a 61 overall offense and a 69 overall defense. How the heck does that average out to be a 63 overall? So I think it would just be a lot more accurate today if we had decimals in our overalls. But anyways, number 8 worst team in the history of Madden, the 96 New York Giants at a 68.5 overall. 7th worst team in the history of Madden, the 2001 Carolina Panthers from Madden 2002, coming in at a 68 overall. Another decimal point here at number 6, Baltimore Ravens, 1997, coming in at a 67.1 overall. Not only is it like a half, they rounded to the nearest 10th here, so 67.1 overall for the 96 Baltimore Ravens. Now in number 5, the 2005 San Francisco 49ers from Madden 2006, coming in 0.1 overall lower than the 96 Ravens, coming in at a 67 overall. Now the number 4 worst rated team in the history of Madden, the 2000 San Diego Chargers. At that point, they were still the San Diego Chargers in Madden 2001 with a rating of 66. Now the 3rd worst team in the history of Madden, the 2002 Houston Texans in Madden 2003, coming in at a 65 overall. And keep in mind, this is the year after the Houston Texans came in with an expansion draft. So the Miami Dolphins at a 63 overall are worse overall wise than a team in their 2nd year of existence in the NFL. That just puts into perspective how bad and how talentless the Miami Dolphins team actually is. Now the number 1 spot for the worst rated team in the history of Madden is kind of controversial and depends on what you think should be the selection here. In terms of strictly being the overall, yes, the 2019 Miami Dolphins in Madden 20 at this point in time at a 63 overall are the 2nd worst team in the history of the Madden franchise. Now, the reason I say it's kind of controversial because the worst rated team in the history of Madden is the 2001 Houston Texans from Madden 2002, coming in at a 44 overall. And the reason I say it's controversial is because that was their expansion roster. That's why they're such a bad overall. So they weren't technically a real full-force NFL roster at this point in time. They were simply just an expansion team. They did have a roster in Madden 2002, and they were listed as a 44 overall. So if we're talking full-fledged NFL teams with full NFL rosters, not after an expansion draft, the Miami Dolphins are in fact the worst rated team at this point in time in the history of the Madden franchise. It's actually hilarious because there's some NFL Europe teams that used to be in Madden back in the day, roughly 10-20 years ago, that were higher overall than the Miami Dolphins are at this point in time. Now, I couldn't find too much information on all of the ratings for the NFL Europe teams, so don't know the exact number of NFL Europe teams that were higher rated than Miami Dolphins, but just the fact that there's one NFL Europe team, a prior team that wasn't even in the NFL, it's kind of like the D League for NFL players, was a higher overall than Miami Dolphins. Once again, just puts into perspective how bad this Miami Dolphins team actually is. So, in conclusion, moral of the video, Dolphins aren't a good team. If you're a Dolphins fan, I'm sorry.